All right. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. I am Anthony with Affordable Pennsylvania. We're hosting the event tonight, and we are bringing this amazing panel together to talk about some of the rise in energy prices that we've seen in our area and what has contributed to that, what's going to contribute to that in the future, and how as a region and a state we can move forward and protect ourselves from rising energy prices and what we can do. So, who here has seen their energy bills go up recently? Yeah, just about everybody. Anybody want to share something particularly, horrific or anything that stands out to them recently?
Near our place, we keep getting power outages. There's nothing in our house that's causing it. Just our power just randomly going out or flickering on and off.
So unreliable service is what is, despite the rise in energy production and energy prices, the service is unreliable. The infrastructure is old. Yes?
I live right by where all of the sinkholes happen in Wilkes-Barre, and with that, we've had on and off with the water here. There's been no notifications for that as well, so that's just kind of, sometimes I come home from work and I'm like, oh, do I have enough water for my cats? You know what I mean? And that alone, with dealing with the possibility of making sure you get to and fro, sometimes you can't get to the grocery store, you know what I mean, in order to get a gallon of water to make sure everybody's good. And there would be no notification half the time until either through text and sometimes not even through the app itself, which I found.
Yeah. So again, increase in prices with an aging infrastructure that is just failing throughout the region. So let me introduce our panelists here, and we will dive right into the evening and into the questions that we have for them. Sarah Corcoran is the Deputy Director at Sierra Club, PA. She is a lifelong NEPA resident and has been an organizer and educator in the environmental field for 20 years. In her role at the Sierra Club, she works with volunteers and staff to organize and mobilize around grassroots action, focusing primarily on conservation priorities and equitable outdoor access throughout the state. Regan is the Senior Campaigns Director at PennFuture. In this role, she leads PennFuture's campaigns and staff to carry out meaningful, multifaceted projects around the Commonwealth. She has been with PennFuture for over a decade, working with former Senator Bob Casey's environmental staff in DC prior to working for PennFuture. Dr. Joyanna Hopper is an associate professor of political science at the University of Scranton. She's a political scientist with expertise in sub-national environmental policy in the United States. She publishes on the enforcement behavior and reputation of environmental agencies in the U.S., along with the success and failure of environmental legislation in subnational legislatures. At the University of Scranton, she teaches courses in public policy and administration and American politics. So thank you all for being here. Really, really appreciate it. So the first section is about energy prices. We just heard from some people whose energy prices have gone up. How have Pennsylvania prices, risen, and how have they risen in comparison with our, regional neighbors?
Well, I have a stat here, and sorry, so Annie Regan with PennFuture, and I'm looking at, there's a lot of numbers here. Our energy affordability presentation that we just put out last week to our members, and I'm happy to send out our recording of that webinar and some slides that have some good resources. But electricity prices and rates in Pennsylvania have jumped 46% since 2018. And that's higher than neighboring states like Ohio and Virginia. I think maybe Ohio's 40%, which is still significant, but Pennsylvania is way higher, according to the Pennsylvania Independent Fiscal Office. So it's one of the highest states to have such an increase in energy prices and rates. And as an environmental advocacy organization, we like to always compare how we're doing to Ohio and New Jersey, and right now Pennsylvania is sort of a loser in sense of energy prices and being competitive, and the consumers are the ones that are paying the price. So it's definitely a lot, and I can see in this room here that everyone can agree with that. So yeah, 46% since 2018 is a pretty significant jump.
That seems pretty on par, Annie. My PP&L bill was almost double the last time I checked my bill, which is a little bit mind-boggling to me. And the fact that Pennsylvania is so much higher in comparison to our neighbors is also something to consider, considering we're all part of the same regional grid. So Pennsylvania is part of something called PJM. It's a regional grid that covers 13 states in the area. So we are all kind of managed by the same overarching entity when it comes to our power supply. And one of the main reasons that our energy costs have been going up over the last few years is because of supply and demand. So we don't have the capacity. We don't have the amount of energy on the grid that we need to sustain the growth that is happening right now. And part of that is because there are so many projects in the queue at PJM that it's becoming a bottleneck. They can't approve them fast enough. And a good chunk of the projects that are in that bottleneck right now are all renewable projects. So there has been some movement. There's a new fast track program that's trying to push things through that queue. But I want to say something like 95% of the projects that have been pushed through recently have been oil and gas, not the renewable ones that are sitting in the queue right now. And so there's so much happening behind the scenes that is increasing the price, between the bottleneck of the projects, between speculation on energy demand, because there's all of these massive projects that are being proposed, and PJM doesn't know what's actually going to end up on the grid versus what is not in the long run. So they're overinflating the energy demand to counterbalance all of the proposals that are coming through. There's also so much worry as far as capacity goes that they're actually forcing outdated facilities that were set to retire to stay open longer, which is costing them more money in the long run because they haven't made any of those upgrades to stay competitive. So there's a whole bunch happening at the regional level that's impacting us here at the state.
Can I just build off of that for 1 second? So I read this PJM interconnection as I was prepping for this, and could someone just give like a real basic kind of layman's level explanation for what PJM interconnection is, just so that we have like since we're all sharing the same base of knowledge? Can someone just kind of give like a real basic,
Yeah. So I've kind of heard it referred to as like a traffic controller for power in a way. So an organization that's sort of coordinating competitive wholesale electricity market and managing a grid for, I think, somewhere around 65 million people. And so that includes Pennsylvania and 12 other states, and then I believe maybe Washington, D.C. as well. So
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, I think it's that widespread. And I know, as far as increasing costs, one of the things that happened recently as it relates to PJM is they had an auction that was related to capacity costs. And the capacity fees are mainly given to generation companies in order to help them support situations where there's high demand. So what we just experienced over the last few weeks, extensive periods of very cold weather during the summer, long periods of time of hot weather, all of that requires increased capacity. And so some of these fees go into making sure that you have energy during those times of really high demand. And so something that happened recently was that when they had a capacity auction, it resulted in pricing that was 833% higher than the prior year. And so that then translates into a potential 10 to 20% increase in residential electricity bills as well. And that increase is even higher for businesses, from my understanding. And so when you think about capacity fees and you sort of think about this as being something that is going to continue to increase with volatility in weather, another thing to sort of think about is if we see continued long periods of very high temperatures, or we see this back and forth where we have periods of very cold temperatures, that volatility is going to mean higher demand, that's going to require greater capacity, and that's going to mean those fees go up, and then all of that moves down to consumers. I know the University of Scranton, in partnership with the Institute, we do a living wage report every few years. And the last one that we did, one of the major things that came out of that, people that we interviewed, the stats that we were looking at was just this massive increase in the cost of utilities. And that it was stretching people's budgets to make it to where they felt as if they were no longer able to have a living wage. So this is a very serious problem, and it's a problem that is multifaceted, and if it is not addressed, these are not costs that are going to go down.
And I brought these nifty signs, clean energy equals lower bills. I don't know if we can be interactive here, but how much of Pennsylvania's energy grid do you guys think comes from renewable energy sources?
Renewable or green?
Clean, we'll just say clean.
Okay.
So that includes,
Including nuclear.
well, we'll say non-including.
Okay.
We'll say non-clean, not nuclear, so renewable.
20%.
My guess would be less than 10.
4%, maybe getting closer to 5%. So a lot of folks are really shocked by that number because, again, where Pennsylvania is losing to other states are doing way better than we are with our clean, renewable. And there's a whole other thing, and I can get into long-term policy about how we can advocate for more renewable energy on our grid. But a big factor for creating a more resilient energy grid is a diversification of energy sources. So she just referenced this past winter storm. The winter storm Elliott in 2022, about 70% of the failures from the power outages were from gas plants. And so we have studies that show, and people that monitor the PJM market saying we need diversity, we need a more balanced energy grid. So even if clean energy can come off as a partisan issue, we need a balanced grid because we cannot rely on one power source like natural gas, which is what what our energy grid is mostly made out of. And the coal plants are retiring or trying to retire, but staying longer. We're paying more for these inefficient coal plants. So clean energy plays a major factor here. And of course, that's more of like a long-term solution to fix this problem, so we're not kind of paying these bills over and over again. And a lot of legislators will say the solution is we need more gas plants. Absolutely not. We need to have more of an energy mix. We need clean energy, and like Sarah just said, there are thousands of clean energy projects waiting in the interconnection queue, and they would lower our bills, but for some reason they're not getting onboarded. So it's sort of a message that we've been saying over and over again, and we're going to keep saying it until it finally gets greenlit. So if you see those signs and wonder what the clean energy connection there's a huge factor into lower energy bills.
It's actually less expensive to get clean energy on the grid as well versus the non-clean counterparts. Like if you think about the infrastructure that's involved, like when a frac pad goes in, for example, there's so much infrastructure that goes with that. That it's not as cost effective as like a solar array or wind or any of those other like clean energy infrastructure projects.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at something like wind and solar, as far as the cost go, I mean, you can't even compare as far as fuel costs go, lower operation and maintenance costs than fossil fuel power plants. The OBBA, which is the one big beautiful bill, I think, right?
Yeah.
The way that moves policy towards more reliance on fossil fuel power plants, that is estimated to lead to an increase in about $3.1 billion in fuel and operation and management costs by 2030, rising to about $4.9 billion by 2035. It's not cheap, right? So moving in that direction is not going to drive costs down at all.
So I'm really glad you brought up the, one big beautiful bill, because I did want to talk about that tonight, and I wanted to talk about what kind of programs did that bill end, right? Like, what did we lose in that legislation in terms of energy production for the grid and also in terms of business owners and homeowners?
Well, as we were saying, there's a lot of those renewable energy projects that are currently stuck in the queue right now, right? Well, several of those projects might not make it to the end of the queue because they were relying on credits that would have been offered that are now expiring. So we're seeing that a lot of renewable energy projects are actually pulling out because it's now not as cost effective because they're not getting those incentives anymore.
Yeah, I mean, generally, this was pretty much a reversal of what the Biden administration had put forward in previous legislation that expanded renewable energy credits and incentives both at the household level and moving up into the corporate level and industrial level. And this takes away those things. So it either ends them immediately in some cases, or it shortened the timeline for them. And so in some cases you have projects that are continuing, but they're being rushed through the process, which makes them less likely to finish, makes it more expensive. But for many of these projects, they're just going to be abandoned. And so if you think about, if you look at what new energy capabilities we were developing prior to this, there was a large portion of that was renewable energy. That was where sort of the new stuff was coming from. And if we stop that, which is basically what's happening with this legislation, to stop it, or to slow it down at the very least, we're in a lag. We're lagging behind, right? And energy demand is only increasing and increasing and increasing. And so we've taken what is ultimately a pause and potentially steps backward as we are trying to keep up with growing energy demand. And so from that perspective, again, this is something that even if there were small short-term cost decreases, this is not going to get us to a point where we have the energy capacity that we need to support demand, which means it is not going to get us to the point where we're going to have affordable energy.
And in terms of direct impact to your energy bill, it took away a lot of consumer tax credits for making your home more energy efficient or getting solar panels on your own roof. And so the tax credits were a really great step in reducing your energy bill directly and not waiting these long-term solutions for PJM to get these clean energy projects on the grid. And so a lot of folks, I think the deadline it's phasing out.
I think it depends on which one.
Yeah. And so it's so the solar industry that we work with and try to promote projects, they're definitely going to get quite a hit of less projects that they can do because you can afford. It was like a 30% tax credit if you installed solar panels, which is a significant help because it's expensive. So that was a devastating loss.
Is there a way to
Comment. In Luzerne County last year, we had 2 solar farm projects that were shot down. And 2 of the representatives that fought against those were in favor of the Sarah frack gas to gasoline plant in Newport Township. It was going to be the third largest supplier of CO2 into the atmosphere. So that's the kind of political atmosphere that we have here. Solar farms are getting shot down, but yet now the AI data centers, for some reason, they don't like those.
Yeah.
But as far as the gas plants, that wasn't a problem, but solar farms were.
There's a lot of layers to that too. I would say like the oil and gas industry has a lot of influence on legislators. There's a lot of money that's into that, so it's not surprising to see legislators back those projects. I think the solar industry needs to step up a little bit to be more proactive and talking to legislators and talking about the tax revenues you can bring into communities and talk about the jobs that you can create. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done to working with the renewable and the clean energy industry to ensure that they're good paying jobs, they're local jobs, there's training, apprenticeships, that sort of thing. And I know there's a lot of blue-green working groups and the Blue-Green Alliance, so there's a lot of those conversations happening because a lot of times the gas industry will tout jobs, but they kind of overinflate the amount of jobs, and they're out-of-state workers or temporary jobs, or they include people working at the gas station nearby. So it's yeah.
And I do think, there are these conversations happening at a broader level, like you were saying, with like the Blue-Green Alliance and all that, but not as many conversations are happening at the community level. There's still a lot of NIMBYism happening when it comes to solar panels. They see all of these like larger solar arrays and they think that it's going to mess with agriculture or it's going to change like the traffic patterns, or that it's what happens when you decommission it. Like there's all of this negativity that surrounds solar particularly because it's been kind of fed to us over the years by those lobbyists amongst other people, right? So, combating that misinformation is another really big thing that we need to do, because we're having these solar projects that are being turned down, but the things that are going in their place are 10, 20, 30, 50 times worse than what could have been in that location.
And one more thing I'll say about this, because I do a lot of this type of work, and I find like digital communications campaigns really intriguing, because you don't want to repeat the myths and the information that your opponents are saying, because people will read it, and even if you're like, this is wrong, they'll remember it and think it's true. And so we're trying to, I know like with the Sierra Club and other groups, like raise and amplify farmers who have gone solar to be like, this worked for me, it saved my family's farm, it's saving me money, it's not damaging the soil, I do it correctly. So we're trying to amplify that on social media, like Nextdoor, Facebook, where there's really contentious arguments about bizarre solar myths out there.
Amongst other things.
Yeah. So it's a positive campaign, it's not scary, and I think when you see, I used to run the Pittsburgh Solar Tour, I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and the number of homeowners who had gone solar was increasing, and folks that were hesitant about it, once they saw their neighbor get it, it made them question it and talk to them. So I think just seeing more of it in a community and amplifying those stories goes a really long way. They don't want to see like PennFuture put out a fact sheet, because who are we? Like, we're not in your community. But if your neighbor has it, trying to find ways to lift that up and not demonize solar, it's not gonna ruin your farmland.
Is there, these might not be answerable, and if they're not, that's okay. Is there a way to quantify the impacts that losing things like those tax credits will have, right? So like, how much can we expect to see demand rise because people aren't making energy efficient changes to their homes, right? Like that would have normally been made because they don't have that tax credit anymore. And another question, which is a separate question, but I also don't know if it's answerable, is how many years do you think we got set back by these projects that are now pulling out, right? Like how far behind are we now? So if they're not, I thought of them on the spot right now. If they're not answerable, that's okay.
In terms of like climate.
In terms of
or-
clean energy production progress, right? Like in terms of having these projects online and ready to go and supplying energy to the grid, how far behind are we now compared to where we were in 2024?
I know those numbers exist.
They do. Yeah.
I just don't know what those numbers are.
Yeah.
So I don't want to quote something that's incorrect, but
Same,
they
yeah.
do exist. And
Okay.
I do know the number of like the cancellation we've had, the cancellation or delay of over 1,000 jobs and $194 million of investment in Pennsylvania is what we lost basically from the cancellations of the clean federal infrastructure investments. So it's a lot of money. It's a lot of delaying. I don't know the amount of years, but the clean energy future is going to happen. It's inevitable, and the more we resist it, the more we're behind on pre-apprenticeship training, apprenticeship training, and really training our energy force who have very similar skill sets into these types of roles. There's little projects and little trainings going on throughout the state, but there's without that coordinated federal funding, we're going to be behind other states again and again, and we're not going to be competitive. People are going to see their electric bills and decide to look at other states that have cheaper, more affordable options, and Pennsylvania needs to step it up, and I don't know why our legislators aren't talking about it, because it's a huge, huge issue.
If I may, I was actually thinking about that. We're talking about tax credits for all of these green energy initiatives, right? But are you guys aware of any state legislative pushes to offer state level incentives to put in solar or any other kind of energy?
Where to start? There are definitely this is what organizations like ours are fighting for. Like, the federal government is not doing its job. The state needs to step up and fill in those gaps. And that's exactly why, and there's papers in the front, and we gave a presentation. PennFuture put together an energy affordability agenda, and this is by no means the only things the state can do. We just wanted to prioritize like 10 action items that some of them are a little ambitious, and then some of them are moving right now. There's movement, and some we're making progress, but there's immediate actions the state can take. There's like 1 to 5 year action steps, and then there's long term. And so, like, an immediate action is having a summer moratorium on utility shutoffs during the really hot summer times when your bills are increasing because you're cranking up that AC. There shouldn't be utility shutoffs during those times. That's actually dangerous. And actually, Governor Shapiro mentioned that in his action housing plan. He called for that. So now the legislature has to implement that. So things are moving. I think they're understanding how dire it is right now, especially climate change making summers hotter, winters colder. That's a huge factor to all of this too. And then there's a bill that we're really excited for, and if you subscribe to PennFuture, you'll get an action alert to contact your legislator we have all these warehouses. We should make the roofs on top solar ready so that these warehouses can put solar on top. And folks that are saying we don't want solar on our farmlands, fine, then put them on the warehouses that are taking up so much space.
Like parking lots.
yeah,
Yes.
parking lots are great. When I talk to people about warehouses and the solar arrays on the top of them, they don't understand in the beginning that the warehouses are designed so the roofs can't maintain the weight. So in order to make them solar ready, they would need to make the roofs more structurally sound, and which costs the warehouses money, and that's why they're pushing back. But it really does make a lot of sense to use the spaces that we already have, the warehouses, the parking lots, some of the non-reclamated, I can't even say the word, the reclaimable mine lands. There we go. So like the places that are already prepped and ready for solar versus like cutting down forests or using other places that we don't really need the warehouse the solar at. I know you did an ordinance about that.
Yes, we not me, I won't take the credit, but our amazing legal team put together a solar guidebook. And so we have it on our website, and I can mail someone a copy if they feel so compelled. But essentially, it's a guidebook that you would give your municipality to ensure, walk them through it if they want a solar farm, large-scale utility a solar farm in their community, the step-by-steps on how to do that. Our legal team has also sued solar companies for not properly citing a project because of its wildlife impacts or stormwater runoff issues. So there's a lot of scrutiny on solar from our opponents, but we would also argue there's a way to make sure solar is done right so it's not having those impacts. So we think it's a pretty comprehensive guidebook to ensuring solar is done safe, how to ensure community buy-in, and all those other really good things for a project coming into your community. So check it out on our website.
We actually have a webinar coming up that's talking about community solar and some of the success stories that have been going on throughout the state. So one of our groups just had a win out in Moshannon near State College, and they're really excited to talk about it. They got a solar facility that's going to be coming in, so it's really cool.
Yeah, some good tax benefits.
Yeah.
Does everyone know what community solar is? That's also a solution.
What is it?
Do you want to explain? Because you live in it.
You can explain. It's fine.
It's really a legislation that for folks like me, I rent, and I can't obviously put solar panels on a home that I rent. So it's a way to for people that you have a home and your roof is not suitable for solar. This is an option. So right now, community solar is technically illegal in Pennsylvania, which is why
it's kind of bonkers.
Yeah, it's technically illegal, and other states have it, but Pennsylvania doesn't because of our political, makeup in Pennsylvania. So folks can opt into community solar projects, like a local community solar project in your community, and opt in to have your power come from there. And so I've been at PennFuture for over 10 years, and we've been fighting for community solar for that long. So we're still pushing it. We'll see what happens, but I think the more that people know about it, it's pretty common sense. And so the way to get it pushed, though, is to keep reaching out to legislators and talking to your neighbors about it, because if they don't hear from Pennsylvanians that they want this, they're not going to push for it. So I know it's been a long, long fight for it, but it's a great way to reduce energy bills and our carbon footprint, and so many benefits to it. So community solar, I would recommend going to that webinar if you want to learn more about it. So
yeah, I'll give the link to you.
Great, we can send that to everybody.
Yeah, and I mean, just to get back to thinking about what's going on in the state legislature related to this. So one of the things that's part of Shapiro's, he calls it the lightning plan, which is ultimately a list of priorities related to energy, and that is dependent on state legislators doing their job as part of this. One of those things is community energy programs is a part of that. But other things that would increase requirements for how much energy Pennsylvania gets from renewable energy, for example, expanding some of our existing energy conservation laws, looking into polluter pay programs, so polluters who are emitting greenhouse gas emissions, for example, they have to pay in order to do that. streamlining processes for energy projects that are going to focus on renewable energy. For each of these, if you kind of look into it, it's got, the sponsor of the bill, they've got, people who have introduced some of these, and so, they're out there, and you have state legislators that are attached to these things that are working on it, but they need support, and so I think, that comes into constituents expressing that this is what they want, and that it should be a priority, not just, one of the thousands, but a real, true priority for legislators.
There's also, we haven't really brought it up yet, data centers as much.
Well, so right, so
It's coming, I
that, that is, yeah, so thank you. That is, that's where we were actually headed next. There's been a lot of talk about data centers and AI data centers, but when I was prepping for this, I discovered that there's a difference between a traditional data center that we need to go online and shop and work and do all those kinds of things that keep our internet functioning, and an AI hyperscaler I found. So does someone want to just kind of lay out like the basic differences between the AI hyperscaler and the traditional data center that we're used to and that we already have that provides a valuable service to the community?
Yeah, so when most people are thinking about data centers and it's like their first foray into learning about them, they're like, oh, well, we already have data centers, we need them, right? They think about that server room in the back of a company somewhere with all the computers. The times have changed, and a lot. So think about the size of a regular data center, maybe 100 megawatts at the high end. These hyperscale data centers are 1.5 gigawatts, 2.5, 4.5. There's a proposal in Western Pennsylvania to take the Homer City facility and turn it into a 4.5 gigawatt data center, which is massive. And
So how does that, like a traditional data center, like what does that use compared to, the multi-gigawatt center? Like what's the...
well, when you're thinking about like a gigawatt, right? Like it's just a measurement. What does that mean, right? If you look at the Lackawanna Energy Center up in Jessup, its max capacity is like it's 1.5 gigawatts. One data center proposal in Archibald is more than that. It's 1.6 for the Wildcat Ridge data center. So just one of the 6 proposals in Archibald alone is going to take more energy than that entire facility can create. And like I said, there's 6 in Archibald. And then there's proposals in the Dixon City one just got, but
it was a small one.
Yeah, it was a small one. But so like Dixon City, Jessup, Archibald, if you're looking at Luzerne County, there's one being proposed in Hazleton, there's that massive facility in Berwick, Sugarloaf, Hollenbach Township is fighting a zoning change now. So like they're happening all over. And one of the things that communities have been pushing against is that we're not looking at the cumulative impact of these proposals that are going in, because they'll go into a community and the water company will be like, yes, we can provide water for them, or yes, we have the energy capacity. But if there are multiple proposals happening, what's going to happen when we get those hot summers and like Lake Scranton is drawn down, right? So that's one of those things when we're thinking about data centers in Pennsylvania. Yes, we do already have data centers in the state, but not at the massive scale that's being proposed.
No, and that's where I wanted to try to, I think I want people to walk away from this to understand the difference, right? Because we don't want to see, I don't want to see people see the word data center and immediately think massive multi-gigawatt AI hyperscaler, right? That is what we're trying to prevent, essentially, right? Like I want them to understand the difference between that and a data center that we have that we need that isn't that provides a service for the community in terms of like internet access and data storage and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, these large ones, the AI-focused hyperscalers, I mean, they annually can consume as much electricity as 100,000 households.
Easily.
Yeah.
I mean, and then when you're thinking about larger ones that are currently under construction, that can be 20 times the amount. I mean, the amount of energy being consumed by these very large facilities is, it's hard to conceptualize, honestly. I think International Energy Agency said that in 2024, data centers consumed about 4% of the country's total electricity consumption, which amounts to about the entire consumption of the nation of Pakistan. So that's like how much energy. So that amounts to, that 4% amounts to the amount of energy that would have been consumed across the entire country of Pakistan. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, when you think about that and you think about this figure being expected to grow about 130% by 2030, if we're sort of continuing with these projects, and then you remember that we are already struggling to provide for the demand that we currently have that is growing, it makes you question how we're going to have the infrastructure, the energy levels ready. Are we going to become a Virginia, for example, where they're highly consolidated, 26% of their total electricity supply in 2023, it was consumed by data centers. Like, if we become that, what is that going to mean for what we are paying for, you know, not to mention water and ecological effects and all of that. But even if you're just worried about the money aspect of it, we already are struggling to meet demand. And so I think there are real questions that have to be asked about what happens if this consolidation of massive centers comes into the area. Not enough questions are probably being asked about that.
And I don't know if any of y'all were at the PP&L rate case meetings that were happening towards the end of last year. PP&L wants to increase their rates again to handle updating their infrastructure, right? But that's going to be at a disproportionate rate for residential customers versus those folks in the higher tier, which covers the data centers. So PP&L is saying we want to increase our rates because we need to pay for all of these infrastructure improvements. Who do you think is going to benefit the most from these infrastructure improvements?
So, I'm sorry. Are you saying that because data centers use so much energy, they pay a lower rate?
And there's actually, to our point for our energy affordability agenda, one of our things is to ensure that they don't get special rates and subsidies. And there are bills moving right now. I have them written down so I don't mess them up. But there's a data center reporting bill, House Bill 2150. And that requires annual reporting of energy consumption and water consumption by data centers and imposing a penalty if they don't do that. And then there's also a PUC public interest bill, the Public Utility Commission, House Bill 2184, requires the Public Utility Commission to more explicitly consider the public interest when regulating utilities, ensuring rates are reviewed and are just and reasonable. So making sure that things like when the PPL rate case is a perfect example, like they are improving the infrastructure for these data centers at the cost of our bills. So there's a lot there. There's other data center legislation, things moving around. And it's sort of fascinating because this is like a new beast. It kind of feels like fracking 2.0, to be honest, and how people respond and handle it and asking the right questions. And so, yeah, it's right now I think a lot of groups are just trying to ensure municipalities are ready for these data centers and prepared. And the number one thing that PennFuture has been pushing is a data center model ordinance, and we have an example one. So I would make sure you talk to your municipality to see that they have a data center model ordinance in place, so that if a data center does come, they at least have some protections. If you can't stop it, you at least have some protections in place so that's not taking over.
These data center proposals have kind of, it feels like they've come out of nowhere, and a lot of municipalities aren't prepared. So I've been seeing a lot of meetings happening where like the zoning folks are trying to update the ordinances before these proposals come in, because once the proposals are in, you can't really update the zoning after the fact. They can actually come in and try to sue the municipalities, which has happened a few times already. But it is really important that, you know, the municipalities are working towards getting these ordinances on the books.
Is there anything that could be done on a federal level in terms of data centers and regulating, you know, where they come into and how they affect utility? Because I mean, it's a, you know, we talked about earlier this massive grid that we are a part of, right? Like, so obviously there's an interstate commerce issue there. Sure. Is there anything that can be done on a federal level to help protect us from this kind of thing?
It's a good question. I mean, so much of the attention is focused at the local level for a reason, and you know that is because a lot of this is about zoning and other decisions that are made at the local level. I mean, the federal government has the capacity to be able to identify these cross-state issues and to apply regulations and to provide various kinds of incentives to manage behavior in order to make sure that data centers, if they're going to be put into place, are done so responsibly in a way that's going to provide more benefits than costs for people. The federal government has the capacity to do that. I'm not sure the federal government is incentivized to do that. And so, unfortunately, I think what you're seeing is a lot of, you know, like you were saying, local governments who are having this thrown at them and are not particularly sure what to do with this. They're being told that this is going to bring jobs, which, you know, at the local level is something everybody wants to hear. But it does feel like that sort of boom and bust model. Like the jobs are going to come in, or the job's going to stay, how many jobs, and then what are the consequences of what is built there? And so, yeah, I think the federal government has the capacity to do those things. Like you said, interstate commerce, there are ways for them to do that. But they are choosing not to do that, and
we have to let them know that we want them to do that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's part of what we're here for.
Convince them that they should do that.
But to your point, it's exactly the opposite, right? Like in Pennsylvania, data centers have a tax exemption that's cost us $800 million so far, and projected to be like $1.5 or $2.5 billion by 2028. And we have some awesome legislation in the system now in favor of us, but we also have legislation proposed by some state senators, including our own here in Wilkes-Barre, that would actually strip local municipalities of their right to zone data centers, right? So like, outside of speaking up and saying the things that we need to say to our legislators or candidates, so what do you guys have as suggestions or plans from PennFuture to be able to combat stuff like SB 939?
539.
939. It was sponsored by 2 Republicans and Martha.
Oh,
yeah.
939. With like the regulatory sandbox. Yeah.
Fast track.
I mean, this is an issue because it really is. You've got, like you said, you have this list of, you know, goals that are aimed towards increasing opportunities for renewable energy. You've got a federal government that is not supportive of that. And then at the same time, we're saying we need this renewable energy because we need to produce more, demand is tight, but also maybe we're going to make it a lot easier for these data centers to come in. And these things do not work well together. You have to consider whether the capacity already exists in order for them to come in. And if it doesn't, you can't just believe that you can create that capacity out of nowhere. Even if you have these plans to develop renewable energy, like these are things that are not going to happen overnight. And again, you are also being held back by the federal government's lack of support of renewable energy at this point. And so I understand the arguments as far as jobs, and I know there's concerns about national security. We want to make sure that we, are the center of this. But I think the point that you're making is important, which is that these two things do not align with each other.
And in terms of 939,
Could you speak up just a little?
oh, sorry. In terms of 939, we are working on putting out some communications to it. I just got a memo that I didn't read because I was driving here today. So I think we're going to put out an action alert because from my quick look at the notes, it looks bad. So that is a good thing to flag, and we'll probably send out an action alert, write a blog about it, and I'll follow up with, we're going to give you a ton of resources. I just listed like 20.
Yeah.
So you'll have plenty of resources if folks are interested, but yeah, I wish I had time to read it before this presentation, but yeah, thank you for flagging it.
This seems like a real democracy issue in a few different capacities. I think the quickness with which this is happening, it's not allowing for us to understand what is happening. What are the costs? What are the benefits? What does that mean for us? What is it going to mean, even if it's not in my city? Are there regional effects of something like this? We're not given the time to have the conversations. There aren't the forums, the discussions. I've seen some, town halls, but even sometimes the town halls, you may have industrial representatives there talking, and people, I've heard it, some were not allowed to ask questions even, or their questions were not answered. That can't happen with something like this. With something that people don't know about, that has the potential to have real impacts. It's the responsibility of elected officials to make sure that their constituents understand what this is going to look like. Their constituents say, okay, that's right, but without transparency, without discussion, without time, that's not how the democratic process is supposed to work.
I saw an article in the paper today that the Lackawanna County Commissioners are proposing a 3-year moratorium on construction of data centers. I don't know where that will go, but that would be a good start to hold off on things. I know 20 years ago the state of New York put a moratorium on fracking before the money came in. Pennsylvania didn't, and once the money came in, it was everywhere. This might be something for people to get behind that can be helpful.
For moratoriums, and I wish I had our legal team here, it was my understanding that municipalities cannot enact moratoriums because it's not legal in Pennsylvania. The state could enact one. And I do believe there's a co-sponsor memo for a statewide data center moratorium. I don't know if that would actually happen based on the makeup of the state legislature. So in terms of moratorium, we're looking into, our legal team is kind of hopefully going to break down into a blog to see what's legally possible and a video to kind of explain that. But yeah, trying to see what avenues we have there, because from my understanding, that's something that unfortunately municipalities cannot enact.
I know the zoning laws, you can't exempt
Right.
certain things. You can work around them, but you can't exempt certain issues in certain facilities.
Right.
Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit here, and we've already talked about, some of this in terms of what we can do moving forward, right? We've already had some great suggestions and ideas from people. I had a couple specific questions. Someone did mention earlier the governor's lightning plan. He also has a plan that is centered around what he's calling junk fees. So I was just curious if how the panel feels about these plans, if there's any benefit to them, to the consumer, or do we think they're just more of a Band-Aid?
I think the lightning plan is a good start. We, as an environmental nonprofit, are always going to push for a little bit more. We think we need something a little bit more ambitious. But then again, we do live in Pennsylvania, so trying to pass forward pragmatic legislation that actually gets done is definitely it's a nice balance. I think it depends. Like the lightning plan is a package of bills. I think it depends on each bill. Like there was a version of the solar siting bill that sort of is kind of back to the beginning again, and so during our exercise of creating our energy affordability agenda, we sort of took similar aspects of the lightning plan and tried to make it more explicitly clean energy, so that other forms of energy don't get tied into renewables, or like nuclear is a big part of our energy grid, and so saying clean energy and grouping renewable, it's not really expanding our solar or wind capacity if nuclear is included. So it can get kind of very nuanced, and so we're a little bit more ambitious and bold, I think, in our agenda of explicitly calling out renewable energy sources and pushing for that. And we're actually creating draft legislation so that legislators can just pick up where we created and endorse it. We did the work for you. We have our experts behind the scenes. So it really just depends on each legislation. We have to kind of look into it, but we did spend a lot of time on our agenda, so that's really the only thing I can advocate for at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like you said, I think it's a step in the right direction. I mean, many of these things are, trying to at least grab back some of what the federal government previously had tried to do, which is to center renewable energy, to place more investment into that, to incentivize those things. Those are things that we want to see. I mean, I worry, Pennsylvania is a state, obviously. And it's, like the capacity that states have, and it's a big state, right? We do have resources, we do have capacity, but we are still a state. These fixes, I mean, they are going to require action at the state regional level, and they're also going to require federal support. I mean, I think, Pennsylvania can move on these things, and they can move so far, but at a point they're going to hit a wall, because the federal government is either going to make it difficult enough that they can't progress in some of these areas, or they're just not simply going to have the kind of funding and resources to be able to do these things. And so this is not to discourage states from doing this. I think climate change is another good example of this, where states have acted in absence of federal action. But with problems like this, it is not enough for states in isolation to be doing these things. And so we are going to have change at the federal level, in addition to seeing these kinds of actions at the state and local level as well.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like baby steps in the right direction when we need to be running.
Yeah.
So I agree that, we're slowly taking steps in the right direction, but we need to make bigger strides.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking, where is that wall, and how can Pennsylvania advance farther? Look at PJM, for example. That's a regional grid. That's conversations happening between the states, trying to figure out the energy capacity for all of those states. We can do that in certain spaces. Why are we not doing it in others? So if we can move forward together as the United States and do things that we know we need to do. We need to make these changes. We need to become more, like have more renewable resources on the grid. Why can't we make these changes?
Yeah. Yes.
Just a bunch of flat eyes. You can make changes by not cause. Commonwealth's data center president, I think there's 5 of them scheduled in Wilkes-Barre, 3 or 4 scheduled in Philly.
I can't hear it.
Throughout the Commonwealth altogether, there's a total of 12 to 15. And the majority of them, the center, are located around the tributaries of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So, like, Hershey deal, you would just plant 2 Hershey because of that milk. That was easy to produce chocolate. Yeah, it is. You need water. Just this.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
One of the ideas that you touched on earlier that I wanted to make sure we got back to in this section was the community solar idea, and that's not legal in Pennsylvania. So could there be national legislation that would force that to be legal in Pennsylvania, or would that have to be Pennsylvania alone?
I think it would have to be state.
Can I do this one real quick? Let's break down solar very briefly. Solar is the solar panels themselves that produce energy from the sun.
Sir.
DC energy.
Do you have a question? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, you said you thought it might have to be the state?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any federal legislation for community solar. I think it would have to be state because of like legality issue of it all. But I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'd have to ask our federal policy person.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly either, but given how, like, the cost sharing of that and the sharing of benefits and how, like, where it would be located and stuff like that, I think that is probably more of like a state and local.
What's the
policy.
rationale for it being illegal? There isn't any.
Because it's not legal. Does that make any sense, right? Because they haven't. No one's thought to make it legal yet.
Yeah, it's a very silly reason. I'm sure I'd have to look into it.
I would guess industry would not be in favor of it.
Yeah, industry.
Does that have to do with the choice, interfering with like your choice of choosing?
It might be. It might be something.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might be a reason like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point.
No,
Could be like in Pennsylvania, especially. It might be difficult.
Yeah.
So what kind of thing should we be looking for, our national elected, right, our senators and our representative, like what should we be looking for them to do? Because we have talked, and I understand, right, like a lot of it is municipal and a lot of it is state. So I'm just wondering if there is any room to expand on any of these things in the federal level. Yeah.
I think there was, and I work mostly on state issues, so I'm not the best for federal, so I apologize. But I do think there was an Energy Affordability Act or something like on the federal level that I'm not too familiar with, that they were trying to get our federal legislators. So I'm not sure.
I mean, I think generally speaking, we had kind of a sense of a direction, at least, that we could head in previously to help diversify where we're getting energy from, to include renewable energy as a major part of that. I've never really quite understood the idea of taking away a potential source of energy when we are obviously having these problems meeting demand. That does not make sense to me. And so I think the federal government already showed in previous in the previous administration and legislation, that they have tools to be able to move this in a direction that's going to help states and localities. I mean, the primary thing is convincing politicians that they should care about that, that is actually an issue that voters are going to hold them accountable for. And I mean, when you're thinking about, a member in Congress who's running for re-election this year, this has to be a central issue.
You can say Rob Bresnahan.
Yeah. Well, that is who is running in my district, certainly. But no, I think, he needs to hear costs are too high, period. Okay? Utilities are becoming unpayable, and consumers do not want anything to stand in the way of those costs coming down, including abandoning renewable energy. Because that is one, that if that's standing in the way, which it is, that is not acceptable. And, I hate that everything has to come back to, everything has to be an economic question, right? But truly, I mean, the economy speaks loudest to politicians. That's in political science, that's what we know. And so I think making sure that politicians understand that they will be held accountable for this economic issue and that it is central, that has to be something that voters and constituents have to express over and over again. Because again, they will listen if it's about the economy.
Great. So I think this was an amazing conversation. I know that PennFuture has a petition out right now. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that at all?
It's just endorsing the petition that I've been touting all evening. And there's flyers, there's a link, there's a QR code. You can also, I'll send you the link in the follow-up. But I would just say between like Sierra Club and PennFuture, a lot, like hearing all these bills is very overwhelming, and you're like, well, how do I make sure my legislator is voting the right way? We do that work for you.
Yeah, Sierra Club has a really amazing legislative tracker on our website where it goes through all of the bills that are in process right now, what are, like, whether we're in favor of it or whether we oppose it, like who's co-sponsoring it, what are the intricacies of that legislation. So if you're just, I don't know about you, but the numbers go in one ear and out the other when it comes to bills I'm like, okay, well, what does it do, right?
Yeah.
The numbers, I can't remember the numbers. But the tracker, it's right there all the time. It says, okay, here's the bill number, here's what it's being called, here's whether we oppose it or support it, and this is why, right? And it's a big long list of everything that you can think of as far as like environmental legislation goes. That can be really easily found on the website. It's updated all the time. We have a great legislative director that works with our local politicians to make sure that that's up to date. We also have some action alerts on our website right now that relate to energy prices as well. We have one that's open, asking for Shapiro to talk to interact with PJM about transparency, so we know where these bottlenecks are happening and why they are not, like why certain projects are being pushed through and others aren't. And so you can find that on the website as well.
Is that legislation tracker, is that for the state level? Is that for Pennsylvania?
That's state level, yes.
Great, yeah. So there's also something that I've always found useful. The League of Conservation Voters has their report card for federal officials, and so it's a nice, easy metric to look at and breaks it down by different votes as well. That's another good way to kind of see, how your elected official is voting on these things in a way that's easy to read and understand as well.
And that's at the federal level. I know, actually, we work together on the state environmental scorecard to show how our state representatives have voted on particular pieces of legislation as well.
And we are hosting, the Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania and PennFuture, we're hosting an in-person lobby day in Harrisburg on May 4th. May the 4th be with you day, easy way to remember. And so we don't have the link or anything, but it's mostly a save the date, and it's a really cool way for folks to learn how to talk to your legislature in a group setting, and PennFuture guides you and gives you the talking points on bills, and the whole point is to empower you to be like, I can schedule a meeting with my legislator anytime, or like to know their staffer and like voice my opinion on things, because like our groups are lobbying in Harrisburg all the time, but their constituents' voices matter way more than ours, because you guys get to vote for them. So we had a really fun time. We had matching shirts. You get a lunch in the Capitol cafeteria, and you get to kind of see all the shenanigans happening in Harrisburg. Our office is across from the Capitol. So if you can spend a day in Harrisburg with us, we'd love to train you. And we either congratulate folks or yell at them, like nicely, about our demands to put our energy bills forefront. So that's another action.
Yeah, if you've never done one of the lobby days before, they are really neat. And I feel like a lot of people like put elected officials on a pedestal. Like they feel like it's hard to talk to them. But they're just people.
Call their office every day.
Yeah, they're just people. Like it's our duty as constituents to voice our concerns and tell them what needs to change, because that's supposed to be what they're there for, is to, do the things that we want them to do and that we need them to do in order to move forward. And if you don't speak up and talk to these folks, then nothing's going to change.
Okay, I will ask if there's any questions from anybody in the audience.
Would you be able to provide the website for the state level legislature tracker and the federal level?
Yes.
That would be
So
awesome.
for the state legislative tracker, you can find that at sierraclub.org/Pennsylvania. And then we have a legislative tab on the top that you can click and find the tracker on.
And then League of Conservation Voters, it's lcv.org is their primary website. And then if you just click through, you can find the report cards. They're easily accessible there. It just looks like a congressional scorecard there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Yep.
Okay, so, I appreciate all of you for being here. This was amazing. Thank you so much for bringing all of your knowledge and everything. You guys are great.
Thank you for having us.
I just wanted to wrap up by saying, I learned a lot tonight, and one of the big things that I learned was that the One Big Beautiful Bill really set us back. And that was voted on by our congressman, Rob Bresnahan, who, when he ran for Congress, ran on an all of the above energy policy. That's what he promised us. He promised us to run on a platform of all of the above. And as we've learned tonight, the One Big Beautiful Bill is the opposite of that. Instead of diversifying, we are now focusing on fossil fuels again. And we need to be diversifying. So, if you need help writing his office, if you need help making a phone call, if you need help writing a letter to the editor, please reach out to me. And if I can't help you, I can point you to someone who can. We want all of your voices to be heard. So thank you for coming tonight. Really appreciate all of you. And I hope you learned something. Thank you.